Hey guys, what is up? We have so much juicy comic book and movie news to get through today. I mean, we're talking wild villain glow ups, celebrity drama, huge DC film updates, and seriously delayed comics. You gotta stay tuned because we're packing all these essential details into this high speed rundown. And welcome to Comic Issues Daily. My name's Bryant. Thank you for being here. All right, first things first, we're going to have the presentation that is put together by my assistant. And we're covering most of the headlines, get all the details as pronounced or as correct as possible. So here is my assistant with the presentation for you. Here we go.
All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're doing a really deep dive, a granular look at the entire comic book ecosystem. I mean, we're talking about everything, from that first little idea for a character, all the way to how they end up on the big screen and, affecting the real world. So, here's how we're going to break this down. First, we're going to talk about the characters themselves, the heart and soul of it all. Then, we'll get into the real grind, the creators behind the pages. After that, we'll look at the business side, how these things actually get sold. From there, it's the big jump to Hollywood. And we'll wrap it all up by looking at, well, what happens when the real world and the comic world crash into each other?
All right, first up, let's get into what makes comics so alive. And that's the character comeback. You know what I'm talking about? When a character who's been forgotten or was maybe even a total joke suddenly gets a new story and just boom, they're a massive fan favorite.
Especially in the world of DC Comics, there's this unwritten rule. Nobody is ever really gone for good. It's like any character, and I mean any character, is just one great story away from a total comeback. Think about it. A character who is nothing more than a punchline can suddenly become this incredibly complex, even terrifying villain if the right writer and artist get their hands on them. It just shows you how much potential is always bubbling right under the surface.
I mean, look no further than an absolute icon like Catwoman. So she shows up way back in 1940, right? A classic femme fatale. But then, poof, she's gone for more than 10 years, basically because the Comics Code Authority didn't like characters who weren't strictly good or evil. But her real comeback, the one that defines her for us, is in '87 with Frank Miller's Batman Year One. That's the story that took her from being just a cat burglar to the incredibly complex, gray area anti-hero that she is today. That's the definitive version.
And you see this pattern over and over again. I mean, look at Kite Man, a total C-lister joke who's now this really compelling, tragic figure thanks to DC Rebirth and the Harley Quinn show. Or Mr. Freeze. He was just a generic ice gun villain until Batman the Animated Series gave him that heart-wrenching backstory. And you can't talk about this without mentioning Jason Todd. I mean, killing a Robin by fan vote? That was insane. But bringing him back years later as the Red Hood, that was a game changer. It's still one of the boldest moves in comic book history, for sure.
But none of this happens in a vacuum, right? A character's comeback or even their first appearance. It all starts with the incredible, and let's be honest, often grueling grind of the creators.
And the reality for creators can be, well, pretty different depending on who you are. So you've got someone like Jim Lee, an absolute legend, right? He's the president, publisher, and CCO of DC. He's running the whole show. But he's also trying to draw this Batman book that's been facing delay after delay. Then you flip the coin, and you've got a veteran like David Finch. He's working on this new series, Skinbreaker, that is literally built from the ground up to just let him go wild and show off his amazing, super detailed style.
And this review of Skinbreaker really nails it. It's a book where the art is the star, 100%. The plot is simple, classic stuff. Tradition, strength, that kind of thing. But that's on purpose. Robert Kirkman basically created a perfect playground for David Finch to just unleash his incredible artwork. It's all about the visuals.
And what's cool is the story itself is kind of a metaphor for what creators go through. I mean, the main character, Anik, he has to challenge his leader because of this old might makes right tradition he doesn't even believe in. He knows it's flawed, but he has to play the game to change things from the inside. And isn't that a lot like being a comic creator? You have to respect the legacy, the tradition of a character, while still trying to push things forward and do something new. It's a really smart parallel.
Okay, so you have the characters and you have the creators. But even the best comic in the world needs to sell. And that brings us to the business side of things, where you're measuring success in two totally different ways: streaming numbers for the masses and the pure collector frenzy for those hot new print issues. So let's talk streaming first. Check this out. Peacemaker Season 2 actually made a little bit of history.
It was the first DC show on what was then HBO Max to hit the Nielsen top 10 for original shows here in the States. Now, it landed at number 10, pulling in almost 400 million minutes watched for that week. Pretty side, right? So, the big question, was it a hit? And the answer is, kind of. I mean, look, making the top 10 at all is a big deal. You can't argue with that. But if you really look at the numbers, it got blown out of the water by other shows. It was even behind Wednesday, and that show had been out for weeks. So what does that really mean? Maybe it's just a crazy crowded market, or maybe it shows DC is still figuring out its streaming game. It was a solid success, for sure, but maybe not the home run they were looking for.
But okay, let's switch gears to the direct market. You know, our world, the local comic shops. And over there, the story is way simpler. Things are on fire. We're seeing brand new series selling out immediately, getting rushed back for second, even third printings. That's the real proof right there. It tells you the core collector audience is super engaged and that the thrill of chasing down a hot first issue is as real as it ever was. You guys know what I'm talking about.
And when you have that kind of buzz, doesn't matter if it's on streaming or in the comic shops, it's like a bat signal for Hollywood. That success is what makes them come calling, ready to adapt these stories for the big screen.
And a perfect example of this is a comic called The Upturned Stone by Scott Hampton. Now, if you haven't read it, you should. It was actually voted the scariest comic of all time. It's this super creepy story about 4 kids in 1969 who mess with a grave and, well, wake something up. And you guessed it, it's being turned into a movie.
And you can totally see why Hollywood jumped on this, right? It has that same DNA as classic Stephen King stories like The Body, which you know is the movie Stand By Me. And it's got that whole horror meets nostalgia vibe that made things like Stranger Things and It absolutely huge. It just has that perfect cinematic feel.
And this whole crossover thing is happening with the big guys, too. The rumor mill is buzzing that James Gunn's new Superman movie, Man of Tomorrow, isn't just going to nod to the Peacemaker show. No. Word is some of the actual characters, specifically that Checkmate crew, are going to be in the movie. That's a huge deal. It means they're really trying to build a universe where what happens on TV actually matters on the big screen.
But okay, this is where things get complicated. When you take a comic book character and put them in a movie, a real person has to play them. And when an actor becomes Hawkeye or Superman, in our minds, they kind of are that character. And that means their real-life behavior, for better or worse, gets tied up with the hero they play. And that can get really, really messy.
And a recent example of this involves Jeremy Renner, who we all know as Hawkeye in the MCU. A filmmaker named Yi Zhou, who actually worked with him on a couple of projects, has come forward with some very serious allegations. And she released this statement about what she says happened.
So, according to the reporting, the allegations lay out a really disturbing timeline of events. We're talking about claims of unsolicited pornographic images, an incident where Zoe alleges she was so scared she had to lock herself in a room, and even an alleged threat by Renner to report her to immigration authorities.
Now, it's important to add that this isn't the first time Renner has faced allegations like this. His ex-wife made claims of abusive behavior during their custody battle back in 2019, which Renner has denied.
So, that's the whole journey, right? It brings us full circle. We start with the ink on a page, with a forgotten character getting a new life. We see the creator grinding away, the business side crunching numbers, Hollywood turning it into a blockbuster, and then it all collides with these incredibly serious, real-world headlines about the person playing the hero. It just shows how complex this whole ecosystem is now, and it really leaves us with a tough question to think about. How is all of this reality, going to affect the stories that we collect and love in the future?
All right, that was a lot of information, a lot of detail about the headlines from yesterday. Thank you to my assistant for putting all that together. It's really cool, the whole full circle aspect of how we got comics that go into movies that drive sales into comics. So that's cool, full circle. I think it's real cool that the bringing our characters have evolved over time based upon different aspects of media, or different stories and writers like Catwoman and Mr. Freeze and even Kite Man. But one of the biggest ones that was a turn for me was Red Hood, because when I was reading Batman when I was younger, it was more the time of Jason Todd, and then I do actually remember when they killed him, and then they later on he came back as Red Hood. That was mind blowing right there. Jim Lee's art for Hush 2. I mean, he might be a little bit too busy, in my opinion, as the guy running DC to also be doing the art. And that might be one of the reasons why it's pushed out as far as it is. The Skinbreaker artist, which right now I can't, uh, I can't remember the name. Apologize. Uh, Wait, okay, David Finch. I actually picked this up this week at my LCS, so haven't had a chance to look at it yet, but should be pretty cool. The artwork on the cover does look very nice, so very excited about that. So that should be cool. Printed comic book sales seem to be up and driving movie projects, and that's where you get the Upturned Stone, supposedly the scariest comic book that's ever been written. Could and going to be turned into a movie. Could be interesting. Don't know anything about it. We'll see. I think it is cool that Checkmate might be in the Superman movie, Man of Tomorrow. That'd be interesting. I liked all of those characters from Peacemaker. I do think it's cool that Peacemaker was in the top 10 for streaming, but it still has a long way to go to compete with some of those other Netflix shows. And then the information about Jeremy Renner is sad. I hope it's not true, but we gotta wait until it's proven in court of law. All right, so that's just my recap of the information that was presented. But now I got the CovrPrice Daily Shakers report. So here we go with that. And our first book today is most of our top 10 today is dominated by EC Comics classics. We got Mad #2 from 1952, led the pack at $26,400 and a CGC 9.8. And then that is followed up with Mad issue #4. These are some cool looking covers. Came right behind that with $20,400. I don't remember the grade of this one. I apologize, but it's probably up there in the 9.8 also. And then follow that up with Crime and Suspense Stories hitting $18,000. Sorry, my details are a little off, but that's probably in a 9.82. It's up there. I apologize. And then we got Vault of Horrors, issue #35 by John Craig, sold for $15,600. And we followed that up with Tales from the Crypt, issue #35 and issue #41, both cracked $14,000. And then we got Weird Science Fantasies, issue #29 with the Frank Frazetta art brought in $14,400. And then we got Weird Science, early morning. Then we got Weird Fantasy #16 showing up twice, two different colors, one at a 9.8 and one at a 9.6 from 1950. And they both landed $13,200. And then the last one in to wrap up our top 10, we got Weird Science, issue #14. And this is a very awesome looking cover right here from 1950, matching that same number, 9.8, came in at $13,200. EC horror and sci-fi books are clearly on fire and reminding collectors how timeless these pre-code gems really are. Which EC title would you love to own if money was no object? And all of these are very cool and would make one hell of a comic book wall behind you if you had all those sitting up there. All right, now I want to give a mention or call out to my live stream that I do every Sunday night, Comic Channel Origins, where I talk to comic book YouTube content creators about how they've grown their channel from 0 subscribers and 0 views up to where it is today. And my guest this week, Sunday night at 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern, is going to be Randy from Swarm of Comics. It should be a lot of great fun. You might have seen him on a past episode of Only Slabs from a month or two ago. They had a lot of great fun, and I decided, hey, I want to talk to Randy too about how he's grown his channel. So come join us, ask questions. It'd be a lot of fun. I know I'm going to have a good time. I hope Randy does also. And then also I want to give a shout out to the sponsor of our channel today, and that is Ron's Comic Closet. And if you use code IHaveIssues at checkout, you'll get 20% off your first purchase with Ron. He has new issues, back issues, and a lot of other great collectibles. So check that out. Link is in the description down below, along with all of the links to the headlines that I covered in today's episode. All right, guys, that's all the major news we've had for today. Seriously, what are you most excited about? The DC villains coming back in a big way? I know you're not excited about this, but what do you think about that crazy Jeremy Renner allegations? Or maybe, what's your take on Calendar Man, or or maybe you're marking a calendar for Man of Tomorrow? And let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications, and we'll catch you next time. Peace out, and remember, I hope that all of your issues are comics.